Hello and welcome to what's a brand new podcast called Unscripted. As the name suggests, this is a podcast which is unscripted. Each episode will be centred around a theme, issue, or topic. Joining me in this mess is Louie, my co-host.
Hello. What's up?
So, as the title of this episode suggests, episode 1, we thought we'd start off in relation to the current ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. This is all about the arts industry and how that's been affected.
And we're going to get into the first section, which we are going to talk about the overview of it and the current state of it. And I'm going to go in with a quote, and the quote is as followed. The creative industries are often defined in a variety of ways by many different bodies from within and out with the creative industry. To combat this, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, which was formed under Tony Blair's British government in 1997, created a redefined definition of the creative industries. Those industries which have their origin in individual creativity, skill and talent, and which have a potential for wealth and job creation through the generation and exploitation of intellectual property. Working from this definition, the DCMS aims to support the pursuit of excellence and champion the tourism, creative and leisure industries. It does so through the drive to provoke growth, enrich lives and promote Britain abroad. The DCMS is able to do this through government funding along with support from 45 agencies and public bodies. Additionally, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport has extensive priority list which includes the following: growing the economy, connecting the UK, encouraging participation, sustaining excellence and protecting Britain, supporting media, ensuring social responsibility. And this ties in with our first section, the arts industry and the current state and how that revolves around it. And now my co-host will give his view on it.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty apparent that every sector across the country, across the world for that matter, is affected by this pandemic. No more so than the arts industry. I think when you look at it, the arts industry is quite distinct. It's been broken down into 16 different sections. But I think the main priorities for us is probably film, music, some art itself. I think all these different practical areas of the creative industry, they're obviously affected. You see that films have been cancelled and delayed, which is not good for consumers and also for companies.
Yeah, I think things like festivals also being cancelled, like Glastonbury. And you've got TV shows productions being kind of put aside, so like stuff like EastEnders, so they can't film anything at the moment.
I mean,
and you've got.
I'm most gutted about Love Island this year, I have to say. The fact that that's cancelled.
Yeah, I know. Love Island's the biggest. Love Island 2020, biggest heartbreak, not happening. I'm sure everyone listening will be really upset about that. But I also think it's quite economically, it's quite bad in relation to film release dates and kind of how much that generates for the economy and for the arts as well as an industry, the amount of money it goes into it as well, and the amount of jobs that will be lost, and how a lot of them are kind of self-employed, especially low-tier actors and low-tier kind of films that aren't as mainstream and in big cinemas, and they're in like the smaller cinemas that are only on once a week. I think stuff like that affects it.
Freelancers are obviously probably impacted the most because they're freelance. They rely on individuals to give them work, and so they don't really have that steady ongoing income.
Yeah, I think that ties in as well with like music. It's like you've got to look at like how kind of grassroots musicians are like working at quite a low level in terms of like listeners on Spotify, Apple Music and things like that, and they heavily rely on things like touring around, say, their home country and getting those tickets for those people to come. That's their income, and so without that they're kind of screwed and they can't operate the way they want to in the current environment that's today.
I suppose that also ties into sort of the idea of like long tail theory, this idea about sort of popularity and sort of the market. So if you think about it, you're talking about these sort of low level musicians. They're quite often quite niche, and so there's not a big market for them, and so therefore they don't make much money. Whereas you compare that to someone like Ed Sheeran, who makes highly popular music and is popular. He's got many outlets still. So
Yeah, they can rely on things like streams alone on Spotify, and they can rely on merchandise, brand deals, ad revenue on different videos and things like that. They can keep going, but it's just there's going to be so many smaller artists out there, especially in the arts, film, actual artists who paint and have stuff out and do sculptures and stuff like that are going to be redundant, and they're not going to be able to work post COVID-19, and they'll actually have to get a different job because they can't do it because they had to try and survive. I think things like that heavily are going to affect the way the arts industry is going to look post pandemic.
it's all very negative at the moment. It's all looking dim and gloom for the industry. I think on a positive note, we are seeing a lot more collaboration between people, a lot more people reaching out. So people doing things like podcasts or more YouTube videos, tutorials.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a positive note. That it does prove as well, on the flip side, that you probably can work from home to an extent and attempt to get your things out there.
Yeah, I think the internet especially has enabled artists of all statures to kind of still be in contact with their audience via the internet and via things like podcasts, tutorials on how they do their songs, different things like that, putting out new music as well. People like The Weeknd have still put their stuff out because they know it's probably the best thing to do in this current state for people's mental health, and I think that's important as well. Music is for a lot of people a core thing for their mental health and kind of helping them in that way, and I think people like The Weeknd putting their music out still and not postponing it is a good thing for those people who feel stuck at home and kind of can't get out. I think that's very important as well to talk about in terms of the overview.
And I think that is, especially on the internet, an oversaturated market. But I think it does show that a lot more people are supporting each other now. There's a lot more artists promoting each other, big and small, which I think has been quite good to see.
Well, I even think within, say, our circle, we've got people doing films, many films like you, our friend Josh, things like that. I think that's, and all of us coming together to like kind of promote it and kind of boost it is like shows that collective side from the bottom to the very top. So you've got people like The Weeknd collabing, then you've got us down here kind of promoting smaller kind of collective projects. I think that's very important. It's showing this kind of collective thing within the arts industry.
We're seeing that across the board as well, out with the arts industry. Just has a lot more appreciation for each other, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's important, but I still think the impact it will have post is going to be heavy in terms of the funding that things like Creative Scotland get in the future and other organisations down south and UK wide, and I think that will affect the quality post pandemic. Not during it, because during it everybody will have the tools to do it, but I think post, and there'll be a period after the pandemic and whenever it stops, that the quality of stuff and kind of the constant flow of stuff will kind of be limited because they won't have the funds to do it.
I think one of the things as well, even just like take cinemas for example, like once everything starts to ease off, is there still going to be measures put in place with cinemas? Are we all going to pack like 100, 200 people in a cinema together?
Yeah.
Or there's going to be spaces in between? Yeah,
they won't. It's stuff like that. Even with like football stadiums, how are they going to rebrand, say, Celtic Park or Wembley Stadium, or I don't know. But you can't fit everybody in there once everybody's had the vaccine. And I think crowded events are something that won't happen for a year at least, because the measures that will have to be put in place, whether you've had the vaccine or not, whether you've had it before, whether you've not had the vaccine, stuff like that will account for whether you can go to these events. And I think that's going to affect the quality of, say, football. I think playing without fans is going to be very tough. And not performing as a musician is going to be very tough as well in front of a crowd, or a smaller crowd. than you're used to.
And
I think stuff
that
like that.
ties back into the idea of that there's now got like Glastonbury being cancelled and all these music festivals. Is how long before these sorts of things are reopened again? I mean, we talk about the idea of
Yeah.
mental health during this time, and what people, that's one thing that they look forward to is festivals and concerts. And now it could be, say, a year before these sorts of things are fully organised and reopened again, which also then links back into the idea of the economic aspect and how these sort of artists who rely on gigs aren't getting that income anymore.
Yeah, I think smaller artists will struggle badly post-pandemic because there'll be more and more big artists out there who will want to be on the festival list, and that'll take up the whole list. There'll be more and more big names on, say, Glastonbury, Reading, things like that, Coachella in America, and I think that will affect the grassroots level of things like music heavily.
I think, therefore, there needs to be some sort of support system in place where there is a fund by the government or something that can sort of compensate or to make up for.
Creative Scotland did announce 11 million funding to the support of arts communities at the moment, but if you think about that on a wide scale thing across the country, it's not going to cover all the arts communities across Scotland. Never mind the UK.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
But it's a start, at least. Yeah. It's definitely a start.
It is a start, and I think if we segue into the section 2 of our thing about the reliance of the art industry, I think things like at the moment shows how heavily we rely on arts in this country. So music, going to the cinema, going to festivals, enjoying that, because it's like a collective thing you do with your friends, and it's kind of this enjoyment kind of thing that we like to have in our life, something to look forward to, as you said. And I think having that stripped away shows how heavily reliant we are on the industry as a whole.
Yeah, and I think there's probably and the arts industry is quite underappreciated at times. And I think nowadays, during this time, it's brought a lot more attention to the fact that the arts industry is essential, essentially. I mean, it's vital for people. They rely on it for entertainment, for escapism.
Yeah, it's even apparent with like new TV shows that are like people are doing it from their home. So you've got people like a comedian that I like, Mo Gilligan, doing a comedy thing from his house, and I think things like that show that how heavily reliant we are as a society on the industry, and how without it or it being cut, that we'll struggle with it. And we are struggling. We're struggling without the looking forward to as a concert or looking forward to for a festival. And I think things like that take effect on the production of the art post it, because the future of it will be quite hard in relation to that.
I think there's 3.2 million odd people who are in sort of the creative sector itself, which is quite a substantial amount of people who are now displaced because of the industry and what's happening. So I think that's something that definitely needs to be sort of sorted out.
Yeah, you could have musicians like serving you at the counter in Tesco because they don't have the money. And I think things like that put into perspective how heavily reliant we are on art as an outlook and a kind of a form of escapism for a lot of us, millions of us. And I think this has put it into perspective for us all. Moving on, you could also talk about the economic aspects in relation to the arts industry, which ties in with the reliance of it. A quote here is said, "The arts and culture has overtaken agriculture in terms of its contribution to the UK economy, according to research from Arts Council England." This does show, again, how heavily reliant we are as a society. And I think things like it overtaking agriculture, which is something people deem as very important, especially within the government, about the way they kind of distribute the budget. And I think the arts overtaking it, even though the Tory government went and cut it, and it's still contributing more to the economy than agriculture, which is something they tend to kind of push because it kind of resembles this kind of individualistic kind of production of money and wealth and kind of goods. And I think the arts contribution to the economy shows how heavily reliant we are on the industry. And yeah, any opinions on that?
I mean, I think, like, if we take London, for example, which is obviously quite a substantial area within the context of the UK, they're obviously one of the biggest places that's been impacted by the virus. And there's something like, 70% of all the creative industries, I think it is, to do with film, is concentrated in London. And so, you look at it that way, that's 70% of the film industry in the UK that got, like, essentially non-existent.
Yeah.
It's been impacted, which has now got a substantial economic impact, both on the industry but also on individuals.
Yeah, I think
sort of wages.
I think in relation to the economic aspect and like how London's kind of the centre of wealth for the country, I think if and when there is a recession or major cuts to the economy, I think things like the kind of core focus of London, and after this, maybe the distribution of arts production might move up north, or it might just kind of blow, like in the wrong way. It might just end, which is kind of worrying, I think.
I mean, I think Scotland definitely, prior to this happening, had a growing industry in terms of the arts across the board, which is certainly positive. And I think that'll probably continue to grow, hopefully, after this has ended.
Yeah, I think places like the Science Centre and the Hydro and the kind of that whole kind of thing along the River Clyde that's kind of there promoting the arts. So you've got the Science Centre, the Hydro, the Armadillo. And I think things like that will survive. I just think smaller businesses like, say, clubs and pubs and things like that, a lot of them will close because they won't have the backing from the government and they won't have been preparing for something like this because this is unprecedented. So I think the economic aspects in relation to art industries, you'll see big things survive, but a lot of little things like pubs and clubs probably will close for a length of time or permanently. So I think that's a worry as well. And that ties into tourism and how the high street will be affected as well. So in terms of the shops that will be open and how people won't be able to spend as much as well. So I think that whole kind of sector of the arts will be heavily damaged because people won't be able to spend much. Pubs will be closed and clubs will be closed. So that will strip enjoyment, and the amount of people who will be able to pay will be down as well.
So I think the high street is already going down as is prior to this happening. So I think it's essentially going to kill it off, apart from the sort of big supermarket chains that are on the high street.
And especially things like Amazon, and they'll be able to survive obviously because they pay barely any tax, and everything will be moved digitally. So like Primark, TK Maxx, places like that, Sports Direct even, and Nike and Adidas can all just move their stuff online.
But then the problem is that creates a sort of dangerous divide between people, young versus old. Obviously, a lot of young people are used to online ordering and how that goes, but a lot of older people like to go in and see something, feel it, try it on. And so what happens to the older population then, in terms of quote, because their sort of high street is their livelihood at times. So what happens once that goes?
I think there's a definite shift in culture at the moment as well, in terms of the way we're going to have to live after this. I think consumerism possibly is a thing of the past on the wave that we were on, because prior to this, everybody was full on, non-stop, constantly buying things, constantly doing something, constantly seeking kind of enjoyment and that buzz. And I think this has kind of put a stop to everything like that. So I think this kind of oversaturated kind of market in the arts is kind of just stopped. And I think people are kind of freaking out about the kind of potentials of what could be next. I think that's worrying a lot of kind of big businesses and stuff like that.
I think that desire to go out and party or to get on it or to buy things, I feel like that desire is only just increased because of isolation, because that's the livelihood that's been stripped away. And so there's a more desire there now to go out and seek that. So I actually think that clubs will probably become more booming and more popular.
It just depends on things like whether those clubs and pubs can stay open for this prolonged time, because in reality, pubs and clubs won't open probably till the end of the year because of the vaccine distribution that they'll have to get across the UK and regulation. So I think pubs and clubs will eventually boom and create a lot of money. It just depends whether a lot of the clubs and pubs can stay open for the meantime, unless they get the support from the government for that period of time. If they don't, and they don't have any money backlogged or saved, then I don't think a lot of them will survive. But you are correct about the whole kind of boom. There'll be a big boom of spending and kind of going out, and everybody will be out. But that could lead to a second spike, and then therefore have a second depletion on the arts industry again, which could be more costly.
It's a difficult situation to get right.
It is, yeah, it is. It is a difficult situation because no one really knows when we're going to go back, and I think the arts industry and tourism and consumerism and pubs and clubs and musicians all don't know when normality is going to be back, or some kind of normality for that sector. Because even in shops and stuff like that, for example, how are they going to properly regulate who can go in the shop, etc.? I know queues and stuff like that, but once lockdown's over, it's going to be mental. It's going to be crazy. The overload of people in city centres, the density of population, things like that. How are you going to regulate that with a police force which has been cut for the past 10 years?
And it's not as if the virus is going to magically go away overnight. So how do you go about easing off the lockdown measures? And when does it return back to normal?
Yeah, I think...
Because it can't just happen overnight.
Yeah, no, it can't just happen. It has to be a thing that they have to ease it slowly so the arts industry can kind of adapt to it and kind of change the way they approach things like people in shops, people in buying things, people in clubs and pubs will have to limit that as well. Other things like that, it takes time. And I don't think people realise that yet because it's an unprecedented thing and people are all kind of in a state of shock and kind of like they don't know what to do. And I think there's the sense of that at the top as well. They don't really know what to do. And I think these false promises that the government are producing is kind of promoting this false sense of hope that everything's going to be back to normal sooner than expected, when in reality it won't be.
No, and I think there's probably a certain naivety as well there, both in the government part and the public's part, about what this.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly was a naivety at the start, and you've got your Prime Minister going about shaking hands and talking about it, and then ends up getting the virus. Seems quite ironic.
Yeah, it does. I even think things like the way the government kind of promote this kind of, we'll be back to normal quicker than usual, kind of riding on this sovereignty argument that we're Britain and we're the best, even though we have the second highest death rate in Europe. And we were slow on everything. And I think that response alone, again, ties in with how the arts industry will be heavily affected. And I think the government will just say, it's not our fault, it wasn't our fault, it's your fault, the public's fault. And then they'll go on to cut things, and they'll just cut the art industry back, and then there won't be an arts industry that we knew of. And I think the overall response ties in with kind of how the art industry is affected economically.
I think if those cuts were to happen, there's definitely going to be a backlash, because the performing arts are, essential. People consume the performing arts one way or another every day, whether it be videos, films, music, clips online. You know, it's
Yeah, I know.
it's a vital sector, both in the UK and also globally.
Yeah, it is vital. Even quite recently, in April, over 100 MPs and peers called to back creative industries in lockdown. So this was like a letter to the government, warns of the impacts of the virus on workers and their families in the industry, which I think is quite significant because it shows that even people in Parliament on both sides know how important the art industries is to the economy, because it's like a form of promotion for the country itself internationally, and without that kind of distinct kind of art arts industry, the country will struggle economically because you won't be able to bring in tourists and kind of that core kind of economic cohort. And I think without that, the country will struggle quite heavily.
I think as well it's important to remember that the creative sector itself is quite expansive. So you're talking about sort of advertising, heritage, fashion, all of those are sort of included and obviously affected in their own ways. So it's important to remember them as well and not just focus on, say, the performing arts as a priority, but make sure that each individual sectors and industry is treated equally.
I think that's a danger as well. I think the government could end up being quite just general and not like being really specific with different sectors of the arts industry. So things like fashion could get alienated and just like collapse. I think they need to be quite careful with that, because if one section closes, then it's like a domino effect and all the others will close or be heavily affected, which I think is quite a dangerous game to play, and I think they will play it, to be honest. So, yeah.
But I think
Any other points on that?
But nah, I think
go on.
on a more positive aspect though, like you said, with the MPs backing the arts industry, I think they obviously recognise and realise the importance of it, which is great, and you're hopeful that something good will come of that, whether that is some sort of recover fund for artists that are struggling. Don't know. But certainly I'm hoping there's a positive outcome.
Yeah, but even with the response to kind of supporting these kind of freelancing people in the arts industry, so from like fashion people to musicians, etc., I think you can compare that with other countries, in like Germany, say for example, how quick they've been and kind of how they've wanted to support everybody because they know it's unprecedented and they know they have to kind of put their ideology aside. And I think to compare how the German industry in relation to arts will be after and compare it alongside the arts industry here and how it differs and how the responses kind of played a part in that. I think that's important to focus on.
I think as well there's a lot more togetherness now, and you found appreciation for each other. I think that imbalance between sort of larger, popular musicians, say, you found appreciation for those who are more indie and niche, and trying to sort of help each other out and support each other, whether it's through sort of donations or just promoting each other.
Yeah, even if you go into like the digital side of the arts, so you go into like YouTube and things like that, like channels are like setting up different kind of like GoFundMe things to keep them going, because that's their only source of, like, the brand deals that they get are their only source of income. I feel like it shows that the government isn't putting things in place quick enough to help these people who are freelancers and work by, and they're not supported by a union, say for example like teachers are, or I just think that's a dangerous thing to kind of leave and kind of just wait, because you're gonna have, because unemployment will just spike and it'll be crazy after this. It'll be crazy, especially in the arts, because jobs will be limited.
Yeah, but
I think that's important.
It has made it realise though that it is possible to, say, work from home and to stay connected online. I think that's opened a new door for everyone, and probably there's been a realisation that society can function alternatively to the way that it used to. Which I think
it's good. I think it's good in relation to the environmental argument. So it's I think that's important to bring in, and it shows that even during a pandemic, we can use the internet positively and not negatively, and kind of promote it through different forms of art, whether that be music, film, other things like that, TV. I think that's important. I think that shows that, as you said, there's like a sense of togetherness and kind of we'll all get through this together, and kind of using the creative industries to push that and kind of keep everybody together. I think that's important.
that's probably quite a nice place to end it there for episode 1. The idea of togetherness, which is vital during this unprecedented times. Yeah, final thoughts?
Any final thoughts? No. We'll be back next week with a second episode on whatever it will be, as we are unscripted.